The story told about Rabbi Shlomo Kalbach, who was once walking in the street, and a poor man came over to him and asked him for some tzedakah. He checked his pockets. He happened not to have any money on him. So as Shlomo Kalbach would often talk, he said, "My holy brother, I'm sorry, I don't have anything to give you." And the poor man looked at Rabbi Shlomo Kalbach and said, "It's okay, you've already given me more than most people." He said, "What do you mean? I didn't give you anything." He says, "You're the only one who ever called me a holy brother." In the beginning of this week's Parsha, the Torah talks about Yom HaShmini, the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. And one of the karbonos that the Jewish people had to bring the day the Mishkan was erected was a se'irizim, a goat, lechatos, for an atonement. So the commentaries say, Chazal tell us, why did they have to bring a goat? To atone, say the rabbis, for the sin of the sale of Joseph. When the brothers sold Joseph, they took his multicolored coat and they dipped it in the goat's blood to deceive their father. So now on the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, they have to bring a goat to atone for the sale of Yosef. The question is, why today, when the Mishkan is being erected, do they have to atone for the sin of sale of Yosef? We also find that Friday night when we sit down at the Seder, the third step is Kaddish Urchatz, and then we have Karpas. Our rabbis say that the word Karpas is from the word Pasim, same etymological root of the word, that the Karpas, the dipping of the Karpas, the celery or the parsley, whatever you use, into the salt water, is reminiscent of the dipping of the coat, the Pasim, Karpas, the coat of many colors was called Sones Pasim, into the blood. So once again, we're sitting at the night of the Seder, and why all of a sudden are we dipping, to remember the dipping of the goat's blood, of Joseph's coat? Why are we bringing up Joseph and the sale of Joseph? And the answer is, we thank God on the night of Pesach for taking us out of Egypt. But why did we get into Egypt in the first place? And the answer is, we all know the story. As a result of the sale of Joseph, the Jews had to go down to Egypt because they sold Joseph into Egypt, and then they went to buy food, and that's how they ended up in Egypt, and that's how they became persecuted. So the night of the Seder, we have to remember very subtly, because the night is about thanking God for the miracles, but we want to remind ourselves, how do we get into exile in the first place? It's when one brother turns against his other brother, when there's strife and enmity amongst Jews, when there's a lack of unity, that's when all of our problems begin. That's when exile begins. That's when our enemies are able to subjugate us. And that's why today, when the Mishkan is being erected, the Jews have to remember that if you want the divine presence to rest amongst you, the Mishkan is to bring God's presence, make sure you're all unified. Because if there's, God forbid, strife amongst the Jewish people, then the divine presence will be expelled, will be driven away from the Mishkan. The key to Hashras Hashchina, to bring God's presence into our communities, is when all Jews are united as one, and we undo the sin of the sale of Joseph. It's a story told about a father had two sons. One was rich and one was poor. And the poor son would always turn to his brother, the rich brother, for help. But the brother was a miser, he was stingy. He would never want to help his brother. He always had an excuse why he can't, help his brother. One day the father got sick, he's on his deathbed, and the kids come running to his side to take care of their father. And the rich son is on one side, the poor son is on the other side. And the father turns to the poor son and is only talking to the poor son. He's ignoring the rich son. And at first, the rich son didn't know what to make of it, but after a while it was very clear that the father was avoiding him. So he looked at his father on his deathbed and said, "Dad, why are you only talking to my brother? Am I not your son too?" And the elderly sick father looks at the rich son and he says, "If he's not your brother, how can I be your father?" And that's what Hashem says to us. If we want him to be our father, then we have to be each other's brothers. And that's what we say in the Shemona Esrei 3 times a day in the Sim Shalom prayer. Barcheinu Avinu, bless us our Father, Kulanu Ke'echad, because we are all as one. And maybe that's why in the night of Seder we invite all the 4 children to the Seder, which represents all different types of Jews. And we say, let us be together. Because if we are together as a Jewish people, then we will receive all of Hashem's blessings.